Hello and welcome to Writers and Books Visiting Author Series. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for people of all ages and backgrounds. You can find more information at our website, wab.org. Please say hello in the chat and let us know you're there. You can submit questions through the chat or the Q&A function. Books are available through our bookstore, &Books. I'll put the link in the chat. Writers and Books would like to call attention to the complex and troubled history of the lands on which we live and work. We are hosting this event from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Onondaga, or the people of the Great Hill. In English, they are known as the Seneca people, or the Keeper of the Western Door. We're so happy to have Cyrus Cassells with us tonight. First, we'll hear him read, then he'll be in conversation with Alison Meyers. Alison Meyers is a poet and fiction writer, twice nominated for a Pushcart Prize. The executive director of Writers and Books, she previously served as Cave Canem Foundation's executive director from 2006 to 2016. In the aftermath of the Stand Your Ground killing of his close friend's father, Cyrus Cassells explores the brutality, bigotry, and betrayal at the heart of current America. In his most fearless book to date, Cassells adds new grit, fire, and luster to his 40-year career as a dedicated and vital American poet. Cyrus Cassells is the 2021 Poet Laureate of Texas. His honors include a Guggenheim Fellowship, the National Poetry Series, a Lambda Literary Award, a Lannan Literary Award, 2 NEA grants, a Pushcart Prize, and the William Carlos Williams Award. His 2018 volume, A Gospel According to Wild Indigo, was a finalist for the NAACP Image Award, the Helen C. Smith Memorial Award, and the Balcones Poetry Prize. He was nominated for the 2016 Pulitzer Prize in Criticism for his film and television reviews in the Washington Spectator. He teaches in the MFA program at Texas State University and is the recipient of the 2021 Presidential Award for Scholarly Creative Activity, one of the university's highest honors. Cyrus, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. It's been a dramatic day, and I've decided to read some poems that I haven't read much on my book tour this year from my book, The World That the Shooter Left Us. The first poem I read is it's called Finding America in Goya's Black Paintings. Today, in the Prado's lower gallery, I perceive our ailing country's fast galloping infamy in Goya's unflinching Black paintings, our vaunted democracy floundering like the Iberian master's sweet, beseeching mutt in a quicksand panic, as Sir Insolvent Mountebank runs extravagantly amok. And how many swastikas and hailstones, how many catcalls and rapes per hour? Through the misted country's spectral atmosphere, like Francisco's sooty, scourging Colossus. Meanwhile, in a sorcerer's nocturnal spell, Senorita's veracity and sanity, those slandered and jettisoned sisters, slowly and fearfully lift in jeopardy from accursed terra firma, hapless victims of the genius court painter's blood-soaked trio of wing-hatted warlocks levitating in a feral frenzy. I'm reading that poem because of the January 6th footage that was shown this afternoon. I was telling Alison and Dan before we started that I wrote this book in a kind of frenzy in the space of 8 weeks in the summer of 2019 while I was traveling in Spain and Italy, and all my feelings about our country poured out of me during those summer months. So there was no particular agenda about this book. And to express my relationship to this project, I found a poem by Adrienne Rich from her 1995 book, Dark Fields of the Republic. The poem is called "And Now." And now, as you read these poems, you whose eyes and hands I love, you whose mouth and eyes I love, you whose words and minds I love, don't think I was trying to state a case or construct a scenery. I tried to listen to the public voice of our time, tried to survey our public space as best I could, tried to remember and stay faithful to details, note precisely how the air moved and where the clock's hands stood and who was in charge of definitions and who stood by receiving them when the name of compassion was changed to the name of guilt, when to feel with a human stranger was declared obsolete. This poem is called "Like Christ Overturning the Moneylender's Tables." And it's an ode to journalism and journalists in our time period. Hard-chasing journalist, target in an irascible homeland that lauds and despises your banner of candor and daring. Uproarious marathon in which the fiats of neocons, the fluttering of fierce slave fans, the steady hiss and malaise of fascist foolscap never stops. Like go for broke Christ in the desecrated temple of the Fourth Estate, from outcry to repeated outcry, keep ferreting, disclosing, demanding what's true, dauntless reporter and imminent in a time of subterfuge and delusion, of unerring rubber bullets and brutally demolished cameras. When 2 and 2 are tantamount to 5, keep crying Geronimo, keep upending the tables. This one's called "Senator, Where is Your Voodoo Doll, Your Snare? Decorum won't do the trick. The Price is Right whores or hallowing intellect. Match quick as a voguing mother from the sassy and treacherous house of La Beja. Your irate constituents insist, bitch, get real. Where is your voodoo doll, resplendent with pens? Your tally-ho fox hunter's feisty sneer. Your ready or not middle finger. No more insipid Mother May I, insufferable Simon says, or Mother Goose for God's sakes. No more beguiling Pied Piper. Trumpet fair and hearty drum roll, please. What we need from you, posing slap on the wrist senator, are stratagems beyond our penchant for ultra plush accounts, elaborate tax dodges and milquetoast dissent, time and again presenting America the Beautiful's cherished car keys without a molecule of remorse to toadies, phonies, and verifiable thieves. We demand a patriotic love, a prosecution whose unsuspected teeth snap shut like a global warmed polar bear's rictus, an unapologetic crocodile's jaw, like the big bad wolf nestled and ready to roll in grandma's frilly nightgown. This is called "The Absence of the Witch Does Not Invalidate the Spell," a beautiful line taken from Emily Dickinson. The absence of the witch does not invalidate the spell. Mister, from love's keening distance, I send you dread, discord, a dead pauper's unerring kiss, double, double toil and trouble, the forged bolts, welts, and buffoonish stitches of your own meandering pell-mell Frankenstein. From Lady Justice's impeccable scales, I bequeath you a child's flimsy cootie catcher, open to the words comb over or snake, a throwaway crown, a fake frack to the hilt share of heirloom land, acres of unsellable real estate on the very dissipated earth you doggedly lacerated and dismantled. At an 11th hour, when the lollygagging, wall-building, around-the-clock inanities and countless renegade cruelties have ceased to grow and cascade like Rapunzel's hair, and the glittering hourglass sands have nearly halted, apprentice felon, primetime charlatan, unbudging jester on the hill, may the emperor's naked folderol, the blight of your slipknot reign, your flat shrill tenure, shock your tattered soul in full. I think you'll recognize the voice in this one. We're going to dial back a few years in Ukraine, go back to the first impeachment. Quid pro quo, two baritones on a phone. Guess there's been a little change in largesse, a little holdup, you might call it, with your country's battlelogged plea for additional funding. Frankly, there's zero need at all to include mealy-mouthed underlings, meddling congresspersons, aggrieved ambassadors, or those cloak and dagger snitches liberals out and out praise as whistleblowers. In heaven's or Tiger Mother Russia's name, it's just between us, artful and enterprising men, two baritones on a phone, two stable geniuses. Hell, it's wartime, Z, and you're downright starved for superior firepower, for buff state-of-the-art supplies. The filthy lowdown is, I'd like you to slur/impugn/sling bedeviling mud at a certain polling high candidate and his linchpin paper pushing son. Let me be blunt. I'm the big daddy with the dazzling purse strings, and I've got you by 1, the cowlick, 2, the coattails, 3, your slick ex-Soviet short hairs. Choose one of the above. Boy, I'm the badass overseer with the blade, and I've got you hamstrung as a shackled fetch from swampland slave. But what do you eager garlic eaters, you hinterland guys, know about cotton-picking Dixie field hands anyhow? And so, my cold-cocked marionette, my Ukrainian cat's paw, you do plan to mount and raise your fancy victory flag, don't you? I thought you'd say yes. This is called Harem Scarum Photo Op and set in El Paso after one of the mass shootings. Harem Scarum Photo Op. In a still reeling post-slaughter El Paso, our lie-dispensing Sachem grins and drones like a 5 a.m. newscaster, giving the cameraman a discombobulating, did I just see that? Thumbs up. The very dime store deity who spurred a locked and loaded disciple to declare zealous all-out war on, quote, invading brown people. In Lady Melania's impeccable Slovenian arms, Lord have mercy on us, the infant survivor gussied up for this mercilessly lopsided photo op in an adorable but reverent plaid bow tie, gurgles, and suddenly begins to learn in a somersaulting, motherless and fatherless world, planet the wild-eyed shooter leaves him, the weight of the word ball, B-A-W-L. I added a couple poems in the spring of 2020. This is one of them. It was written in April in the early part of the COVID pandemic. The title is The Only Way to Fight the Plague is Decency, and it comes from Albert Camus' The Plague, and the doctor responding to someone saying the only way to fight the plague is decency. An American Elegy. Once upon a time, there was a hoax a broadcast to the hilt Rus, a puerile leader's adamant refusal to rally arms against a colossal viral dragon, a winter hustler's fiat that bloomed one titanic coffin-heavy April into a real as your mama's dying hand pandemic. National Malay featuring stock-selling senators, missing in action test kits, mask-begging nurses, millionaire high fives, and jerry-built morgues, a storm-haired leer's flaccid sideshow, a charlatan's heedless snake oil matinee, hail the flim-flamming functionary and his red-handed band of rogues. Land where all the poisonous hierarchies arrive to poison us once more, where raucous pettiness equaled roll calling, brisk as business death equaled my crushed kingdom for a ventilator. This poem is called Obliterate Asylum. The final movement of the book is about the troubles on our border, child detention, the history of torture and domination in Latin America. Obliterate Asylum. Listen, those hometown gangs and death squads, well, they're fake, mojado. Desecrated hands and human body parts, the roving killers hang on trees as a raptor's stern warning. Remember your sorry country's notorious collapse and brisk military coup? Never occurred. Truth to tell, there's only your impinging lust for door-opening dollars and fluffy towels for shop-worn Main Street ideals. Remember the 10th commandment? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's. Do you understand? For this, your child is torn from your ignorant and illegal side, even from your brown nipple. For this, you are gassed at the border, shunted back to calamity, or toothless poverty, or detained at our red, white, and blue discretion. About your filthy cage and troubling crime, trespasser, invader, let's be frank, radiant and glossy, model svelte, think Melania. Lady Liberty has a thing to say from sea to shining sea. Obliterate asylum. And the last poem I'll read is in honor of Scott Warren, the borderline activist who was tried and acquitted 3 times for assisting people crossing the desert. Courage song for Scott Warren. Sing no more makeshift crosses in the gangplank desert. No more, quote, dog catcher trucks. No more jawbones under the moon. Bring your rebellious grit like a bromide or a Borderlands candle to our bigotry as commonplace republics, chaos, bold anima, dissenting angel, among the betraying cliffs and dry washes, the yellow plumes of the Palo Verde, be renegade Harriet in a midnight cane field, General Tubman, be Martin, bravely riding in an abysmal Birmingham jail. Yes, your boundless shepherd's gallantry, your at-the-ready compassion is the rescuing sip and the heaven-sent gourd required at all our desperate crossings. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyrus. I can't believe 20 minutes have gone by. I was rapt. That last poem is exquisite. And to me, it's like a combination between a praise poem and a prayer for our country. It's very beautiful.
Thank you.
So I have a question, a number of questions, so I'll just start at the top. And I know you mentioned that this book poured out of you. But can you talk a little bit about how this book of poems can be so utterly of our present historical moment and at the same time a text for all times? And was this in your mind at all as these poems were, as you were crafting the poems?
I had nothing in my mind because I completed 2 other books at the same time. I've never had such a productive period in my whole life. So I was tinkering with another book that's a finalist for the National Poetry Series, completely different book. So I actually had a double contract for 2 of the books. Actually, all 3 were accepted in August and September. So there was nothing in my mind, just, I think because the other book is very romantic and sexy and funny. It's called Is There Room for Another Horse Under Horse Ranch? And it's mostly about falling in love and after 60. I think it's my most high-spirited book. And I think writing a very high-spirited book allowed me to get into this sort of, I guess ferocity is a word that people have used for the book. When Martha Rhodes at Four-Way accepted my books, and she said, well, don't worry, Cyrus, even in 2022, these poems will be relevant. And as my close reader, Dom Zucconi, pointed out, for the first time, Cyrus, I think you've created a historical document. I thought, yeah, that's true. So hopefully by being specific as artists, we speak across time and space.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I feel now.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a conscience
Right.
and attention.
There's so much of experience and research and that goes into it. So that is all part of the content that comes through along with the passion. You're alluding to all of these, consequential things that are happening in our time or recently. So that's just part of you and it's coming out.
Well, I think I wanted to address the shadow
Mhm.
because I felt I was becoming ashamed of our country at that point.
Yeah.
And the worst parts of it, which were happening in my own state, which is the child detention stuff. So I just needed to find some kind of way of expressing my emotion about that. Also about the hashtag Me Too. There's a whole hashtag Me Too section of the book about it's sort of like time to look at our dirty laundry and fess up and take responsibility and be accountable.
Exactly.
For what's been going on.
I love that Adrienne Rich's wonderful poem "And Now" is the book's epigraph. And I especially kind of focused in on the line, and who was in charge of definitions, as underscoring my impression of your book as a narrative of naming things as they are. This demystification of accepted tropes.
There's been so much, I want to say, distortion in general and linguistic distortion in particular. So I think since truth-telling is part of our task as writers, it's hard to get around the task. We have to keep asking for, expanded truth and precision. There's a line in the poem, it's so personal for me, about how the air moved. I can remember the air outside my apartment during the pandemic in San Francisco. And we were the first people sheltered in place where we didn't know what sheltering in place actually was. And remember the quality of the air in the city when it was shut down and how different it was. So when I say how the air moved, I think immediately of my courtyard during the pandemic. And it was the most, people know I'm a world traveler and a person constantly in motion. It's the most sort of caged I've ever felt in my life and vulnerable. But my courtyard was a source of kind of, spring beauty. And usually what it was at 7 p.m., people would rattle their pots and pans as a homage to the people who were working in the hospitals and dealing with the pandemic there. So that's one line that really has a very precise kind of memory connection for me, which is what poetry can do. It can help you to access your own life and memories. Just the right combination of words, and you're right back where you were. So when I read that poem, I read the epigraph a lot to help share, that I didn't really have an agenda. I always come back to that, what it felt like to be that person looking out at the air and marveling at how the world can function in the middle of something so drastic.
And try to be kind of this historian, as your friend commented.
Yeah.
There's a kind of way in which you're putting it down. You're putting it
recording.
down on paper.
It's witness. I think I like the word witness a lot.
I do too.
Poetry of witness. I was mentored was a personal assistant for Carolyn Forche when I was a younger writer, and we were colleagues at George Mason. So I love that idea of poetry of witness, of just talking about what's literally going on and not trying to parse or censor what's happening, in your work, or just be truthful to what's happening in your life whenever you can. I've always been, I think my prose, which it's not as well known as my poetry, has always been very direct about politics and Black history. But my poetry has tended to be about my spiritual search, and it's been fairly refined and lyrical. So it was good to know that I could go into this mode, that I could get into kind of vampire's rasp, because the book that got me started as a poet was actually Sylvia Plath's Ariel. I had no interest in poetry until I read Ariel, and then I thought, wow, poetry is really powerful. I just wanted to be a novelist, and I thought, well, wait a second, poetry can have a charge too.
Yeah, I noticed you cite Sylvia Plath as one of the
Oh yeah. My first influences, the first book I ever bought was Adrienne Rich's Diving into the Rack.
Yeah.
And Audre Lorde's, one of her books, I think it was Coal, and then my former colleague I's Cruelty book. So
yeah, I know Cruelty was the book that took the top of my head off when I really, this is what poetry can do. This is what poetry can be.
Yeah. So the Me Too section of the book was mostly inspired by I thought, well, she had a kind of boldness and, with even very difficult, violent, and explicit material that I admired and was moved by as a young person. Then I found that vein in myself. So I could talk about things that even happened to me personally. I didn't think I could talk about the things that are in the Me Too poem, but that's my life, and I found a kind of persona and a way to talk about the sexual abuse I experienced as a child.
Yeah, it really works in terms of the arc of the book. We understand the personal trauma in terms of these large historical forces as well. So it's really brilliantly done, I feel, and very, very affecting. I wanted to also ask you about the varying voices in this collection, which I think you probably enjoyed kind of experimenting with and playing around with. There's everything from what I would call the oracular voice to the satiric, the ironic, and you write in persona. Can you talk a little bit about your approach, your strategies, and how you made the decisions that you did?
Well, some people know, a lot of people don't, that alongside my writing career, I've always developed my career as an actor. And I started when I was 12. So I don't have a lot of conscious strategies. I just, I'm a chameleon person, and sort of Neptune rising chameleon person. So I just go into it I give myself permission to sort of shape shift into these personas and enjoy going out of my everyday frequency as Cyrus, which is the point of being an actor, and why we revere actors as great when they go far from their everyday selves. So for me, there's an innate kind of joy in that and propensity to do that without a lot of thinking. So I took permission in this book from but I've always done a lot of persona work, even in the crossed-out swastika. And for me, it's about making an empathetic leap into someone else's lives. And I know there are important issues of appropriation, but I hopefully feel, and people seem to respond to the work and not feel that that's what's going on in the work there. So yeah, I'm a natural born actor. I've had an intermittent acting career, both on the stage, and I was fully trained at Stanford, and
Right.
it's just been run alongside. I've always considered it the thing that I'm best at besides my writing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that makes sense then, that you would kind of fall into this approach quite naturally.
yeah, without
Especially
too much thought.
and the book is so passionately inspired that might even be more so, where it's almost just
Well,
an organic
I
process.
bring up Sylvia Plath because, excuse me, because she wrote Ariel the way that I wrote this book. I wrote 1 or 2 or 3 poems a day. I wrote a lot more poetry than is in the book, actually. So then you start to wonder, like, am I about to die? Am I dying? Why this blaze of work? Remember, I'm working on the other 2 books as well. It's just pouring out of me. But I was free, I was given a Guggenheim Fellowship and leave. So there's that sigh of relief when you know that you have a stretch of time ahead of yourself to write.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
is what happened that summer. I left school in May, and then this outpouring of work began in June, and was pretty steady through. I embellished a little bit in the fall, but mostly all 3 books were done in August there.
That's
So
extraordinary.
there's
Yeah.
a quality of mystery. I'm trying to be as honest as I can with everyone, that when the book came out in February, I had to stop. It was like the white whale had landed on my doorstep. I thought, what happened to me? I don't even understand how I wrote this book.
Yeah.
I'm being
Yeah.
serious.
No, I get you.
It's like possession. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, rarely on stage as an actor do you have those moments where you just lose yourself completely in the performance.
Mhm.
But I really had to pause and think about, how did that happen?
Yeah.
That I wrote this book. The other books came quickly, but like 8 months or something, but also very fast. And usually my books take about 3 years. Sometimes with the Gospel According to Wild Indigo, like 15, like I couldn't get the 2
I
sections.
love that book so much, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I waited a long time for a second sequence to match the Gullah sequence there. So sometimes it's just patience.
Well, Crossed Out Swastika, which is one of my favorite books of all time. What was your productivity or production schedule like with Crossed Out Swastika?
It was complicated by my mother's death. And I felt a little angry that I was so compelled to write about the Shoah as I was in mourning for my mother. Then later on, I figured out that it was a kind of remedy in some way to be really busy and focused in the world and not just grieving. As you know, the book is about the courage of young people during the Holocaust and the war. And I kept sort of, at the time I was spending my sabbaticals in Paris, and, just stumbling onto important World War II history. Like a close friend of mine, I had decided to go to Krakow with a musician friend of mine from the Slovak Republic. And I wanted to meet Adam Zagajewski, the great Polish writer, because I had invited him to my university. And then I got my leave and I couldn't meet him. And I thought, well, wait a second, let's just get on the train and go meet Adam. And on the way into Krakow, we stopped at Auschwitz. You know, and I was sleeping in the train and it just was jolted awake. And there I was on the Auschwitz platform. And I went into the city, and a friend of mine in Paris had said, "Oh, are you going to go to Auschwitz?" I go, "What do you mean? Am I going to go to Auschwitz?" "Oh, it's right outside of Krakow." I go, "Okay, all right." So that's how that happened in the final poem. I arrived in Auschwitz-Birkenau on the Day of the Dead, which seemed very daunting, but turned out to be a beautiful day. There were Israeli school children all over the camp, and the Star of David was flying over the camp. There were candles everywhere because of the Day of the Dead is where people, Catholic folks, bring candles to various cemeteries all over Poland. So I was in Amsterdam and I found myself around the corner from Anne Frank's house. I felt angry at Anne Frank's house because I thought people refused to look at the end of her life. I still think that's mostly true, which was so stark. But people also need hope. So it just things, information was brought to me. I met Shoah survivors who asked me to write about them. So I realized I was a repository of that history somehow, in a way that I think Spielberg or other people of our generation, we didn't live through that, and yet we are carrying the narrative and the weight. I just watched Ken Burns' incredible documentary, The U.S. and the Holocaust, which I recommend to everyone. We have to look at our history of restricting immigration in the middle of genocide, among other things. Intensive sabotage by people in charge, not Roosevelt, but the people in charge. So it's very difficult history, but also, again, I try and my writing does a lot with trauma and history, but I also try and bring a sense of spiritual endurance and praise for that. And I know it's daunting to even look at the U.S. and Holocaust, the 3-part series, but it was easier for me to absorb than, say, even Schindler's List, because Ken Burns and the other filmmakers have done such a great job of not overwhelming us, but giving us a sense of the immensity of what happened. And also to scare the bejesus out of it, because of the dynamics that led up to all of that are similar enough to now to really make us pause, which is what the hearings were about today. It's like, oh, come on, people, we can't keep pretending the emperor's naked.
Well, I think where poets like you come in is a kind of, like, for instance, I noticed you repurposed some classical myths in a way, that's something that, runs through the poems in a way that's works so beautifully. But you also, you really have this very immediate, you allow us to experience things in this immediate, almost concrete way, whether you're responding ekphrastically to a painting or the actual condition of the incarcerated children at the border. And this is where, Ken Burns as a documentarian has his place, but I think our poets have a way of giving voice to people who are not going to be heard, that's so immediate and so necessary. So a book like this, I think, is essential reading for everyone. And there is that personal passion about it that is very different from what, in a documentary aspires to be kind of,
objective and even-handed. I think it really comes down over and over to spiritual and emotional access. For me, writing this book was to give me emotional access to my sense of grief and outrage.
Yeah.
The fact that I think people in our generation, we're in our 60s and early 70s, have a difficult time expressing how out of whack what we've been living through in the past 6 years actually is, because everything is constantly normalized, right? Which just came up in the hearings today as well. It's normalization of the insufferable and the unimaginable and the unthinkable. And the people who lived through Nazi Germany said that every day was a roller coaster and unbelievable stuff. And what does that sound like? The summer of 2020, when they were stealing.
Cyrus, we don't have much time, I think.
Okay.
But so I wanted to use the last couple of minutes to ask
cool.
you to please read the eponymous poem, The World That the Shooter Left Us, that opens
sure.
the book.
Okay. Yeah.
And just before you do, I just want to say so many thanks for not only sharing yourself with us tonight, but for writing this book, which I just want, I'm going to buy this and send this book to so many people, but it's so essential, and it's so beautiful in its grief and anger, but yet there's a kind of hope in it because of the passion, because of the belief that we're better than this. We can be better than this. I think has that kind of core to it, by making us or asking us to look at the very hard things and be accountable and be truthful. Then that is the place for starting to transform. So I would say everybody, please do read this. Even if you ordinarily don't read poems, this book is necessary reading. So thank you, Cyrus.
Okay. This poem was written in response to the stand your ground murder of my good friend and assistant, Edward Garza. His father was shot over a handicapped parking space in Houston. When he was a lawyer, he went to his P.O. box to recover some mail, and he was shot by an elderly man who, I guess the case was that Mr. Garza didn't have the handicap sticker or sign. And he claimed there was a struggle and claimed self-defense, but eventually the forensic evidence proved that this man just merely shot my friend's father point blank through the mail that he was carrying. The world that the shooter left us. In this one, ladies and gentlemen, beware, be clear, the brown man, the able lawyer, the paterfamilias, never makes it out of the poem alive. The rash all too daily report, the out of the blue bullet, blithely shatters our treasured legal eagles, bones and flash. And the brusque spectacle of point blank force on a crimson street, where a revered immigrant plummets over a contested parking spot, and the far-seeing sages insist, amid strident meanids of breakneck patrol car sirens, clockwork salvos, the charismatic Latino lawyer's soul is banished elsewhere without a shred of eloquence in the matter. And the brute churning surfaces of the world, they bear our beloved citizen away, which means austere saints and all-seeing masters, if I grasp your bracing challenge, at our lives' most brackish hour, our highest mission isn't just to bawl, but to turn the soul-shaking planet of the desecrated parking lot, the anti-miracle, the blunt, vitriolic white man's unnecessary weapon, and the ruse of self-defense into justice cries and ballots, into newfound pledges and particles of light.
Thank you so much, Cyrus. This was really great. Thank you. I want to thank Alison as well. Thank you to our funders. I want to thank everyone for coming out and attending tonight. The book is at Ampersand Books. The link is in the chat. Buy it. And I want to say thank you and have a great night.
Thank you, everybody. Alison, so great to see you again. Dan, thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyrus. Such a privilege to hear you.
We need to just zoom it around sometime.
I'm up for that.
Let's catch up. You take care. Bye-bye.